Hey, welcome back to another episode of Dear Baseball Gods. And I'm here with a great guest this week. I've got Rod Friedman, aka the Pitching Ninja, joining us to talk about his amazing following on Twitter, the GIFs, the pitch sequences, the pitch tunneling, the memes, the mental game stuff, all the cool content that he gives so willingly for free out on the Twitter sphere to coaches and players everywhere. So, I know all of us, if you're involved in the baseball community on Twitter, on social media, you've seen his work. They're fascinating, and he likes to highlight all sort of like the filthiest pitches of the night. And it's something that just kind of grabs all of our attention, I think, for 10, 15 seconds at a time. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting just to hear a little more of his story, how he's built this big following, his little scuffle with Twitter and Major League Baseball earlier this year, and just, who he is as a person. So without further ado, we'll listen to my great interview with Rob, terrific guy, Rob the Pitching Ninja Friedman. Hey, Rob, thanks for coming on the show. How's everything down there in Georgia?
Everything's going well. It's a kind of hot day.
So you, a little bit of background about you. You live in Georgia. You have a law background. You were the pitching ninja, the world famous. And your son is just now entering fall ball at Georgia Tech. Is that correct?
That is correct. All of that's correct. I usually try not to admit that I'm a lawyer because it scares people.
Gotcha. Well, so are you a reformed lawyer? Are you still lawyering, or how is lawyering going?
I still handle legal stuff to the extent it comes up, but I do more business stuff nowadays. I haven't taught law back in the day for a couple of years, which actually is useful in some weird way when it comes to pitching and explaining concepts, and for myself, understanding concepts and digging deeper. So in a weird way, having that legal background is useful, but yeah, it's overrated.
well, it's probably that pragmatic kind of mindset that lawyers have, right? I mean, you had to really. So, what kind of law did you do?
Corporate law and technology law. So
Okay.
a lot of it's digging through kind of not the BS necessarily, but the noise, and trying to figure out commonalities and stuff like that. That's where I think it helps. Is really trying to boil things down step by step, logically trying to figure things out. But again, that's just legal training in general. You can do it without legal training too, just being logical minded, I guess.
Yeah, gotcha. So for those of you listening at home, if you don't know who Rob Friedman is, he is the pitching ninja on Twitter. And what's your follower count at these days? I can check it, but
yeah, I could pull it up. It's 92,000, something like that.
man.
Let's see.
Well, it's fun.
92,400.
Okay. Well, and it's funny. I pulled up an article yesterday, and we're going to get into what Twitter does for you and how it's evolved, and because I think it's a fascinating thing. I mean, and a little bit of background about Rob and myself. We don't really know each other. I think we both know of each other for a long time, but I reached out to Rob recently asking if I could use one of his GIFs in one of the things that I'm creating on my website, and he happily agreed. But I also am still nervous about MLB licensing and all that stuff, so I haven't used anything yet. But perusing through your free library, I mean, it's fascinating. So we chat a little bit and talk pitching, and we have a mutual acquaintance in Ben Brewster who's worked with your son a number of years, and but we got to talk about pitching, and I listened to your podcast episode with John Gellner, which was really good. And so if you don't know much about Rob, he's also a very knowledgeable baseball coach. You coach high school in Georgia. What high school are you the head coach of?
At Paideia.
Okay. And so, I mean, it's just one of those things where I kind of wanted to get behind the mask a little bit, because I think everyone retweets Rob's GIFs, and I've seen them kind of change over the last even couple of weeks, I feel like, where, I liked your photo last night of Severino. It was very well drawn.
Oh, dude, I am really talented when it comes to, that's one of my special talents. Not really.
Yeah,
not
I can tell. Well, I think you have a children's book in you somewhere.
Yeah, I just try to enjoy myself.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, Rob retweeted one of my articles that I had wrote for the website Medium, and that article was actually relatively popular for me because it was kind of a raw, like, recounting of a story I had with a teammate. And so for me, as a guy who has like a very modest online following, that one got around okay. But then Rob retweeted it, and I think I made like five or 600 reads of that article over maybe like a month period since I published it. And in the 8 hours after you retweeted it, I think it was read 1,000 times.
Wow.
So it just shows the power of the internet. And I'm like, wow, this is why social media is useful to someone. Like it doesn't matter what you create, say it's your book or you sell pottery or, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, that's meaningful to me because I write stuff like that to try to get people to read it because I
Right.
write it for someone's benefit. And then you talk about leveraging a following to just help it get farther out. So I appreciate you doing that because you didn't have to, but B, it's just really cool. So tell me about your Twitter following because it's massive and I see you everywhere on the web. I know the big leaguers interact with you, but how did that get started?
All right. So it really got started because I had been coaching for a number of years and really was a kind of self-made coach. I mean, my history in baseball playing wise kind of sucks. I mean, I really was never very good, but I didn't want to. When I got involved in coaching, I guess part of it was the teaching background I had in law. Part of it is just interacting with kids and wanting to be an influence on their lives, and then realize that I've always loved pitching in general. So I was really self-taught and continue to be self-taught. I mean, I dig as deep as I can into things when I like them. And so the process of learning all that to help my son and the other kids I was coaching, I felt as my son's career was, moving up and up the chain, I didn't know how much longer I'd be doing it, but I didn't think it was fair for all that information to kind of die with me and to die out and to not help other people along the journey. So my real start of it was to help parents and other players kind of navigate through all the resources out there. I mean, I get obsessed about stuff and dig really, really deep into it and have a lot of resources, I mean, even financially buying stuff and trying things out. I've gone through all that stuff and just trying to share my own experience so people, number one, don't make fewer mistakes, but also are just able to navigate through the process and help their kids or help their own career the best they can. And then help coaches also who don't have, I mean, a lot of people don't have the time or want to put in the effort. Or maybe they do want to put in the effort, but they want to be more directed with it. I've gone down so many different paths that I think sharing that information is useful. And I think all of that information, I mean, it's like, I was just thinking about this today as we were getting ready for this podcast. I think most of the information out there's a lot of good stuff, but it may not be good stuff for you. It may be that, certain things click for you and other things don't. And as a coach, I feel it's useful for me to have a toolbox of information that when I see a player that fits more within a certain mold, I'll use those tools. And when I see something else, I'll use other ones because most information out there is good, but it's only as good as it fits for the player.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you kind of use a lot of your gifts, and maybe the start is just giving kids comps of someone to hey, this is kind of what you look like to me, or maybe you could throw like this guy.
Some of it is that, yeah. That's so with the gifts specifically. Some of it is to show sequences that. Some of it's to show grips and spin axes of pitches to say, hey, maybe you want to try this. Others is to show mechanics, how people may use their lower half the various ways to show there's not really one way of doing things, and that maybe somebody's a better comp for you. And other things are just because I think it's funny or to get people more interested in stuff. I think creating a community of pitchers allows people to ask questions, allows people to take pride in pitching, get interested in it, and really try to be an ambassador of baseball in general to keep the sport interesting, lively, fun, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, being an ambassador of the sport, I think that kind of segues me into your little snafu with Major League Baseball this past year,
Yeah.
which, I caught wind of, and there was a hashtag going around, Save Pitching Ninja. And can you tell me about what happened and how it got resolved?
Sure. So, yeah, it was a really minuscule dispute, I thought. So a guy from Barstool Sports had retweeted one of my gifs that I had changed. I'd slowed it up to just show the movement of a Noah Syndergaard pitch, and then actually ended up passing it off, basically taking it and then it passing it off as if it was his own. And saying, "Hey, look at this." And I was like, "Wait a second, you don't do that on Twitter. You don't take somebody's GIF and then tweet it out like it was your own. You retweet it if it's something that you find interesting, or quote tweet it, whatever." He just took it and put it out there. And when I called him on it, he snapped back and said something like, "Well, MLB really owns the rights to all this stuff," and it created a whole thing. And I mean, you're familiar with Barstool.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really good folks there. There's some, and there's some folks that just take it. It's like 4chan or something like that, where you create this uproar, and they contacted his followers contacted MLB, who then issued a takedown notice to Twitter. Everybody did what they were supposed to do. MLB, when they get that notice, sure, they will say, "Hey, it's my copyrighted material. Twitter, you should take it down." Twitter, once it gets that notice, they don't really have much of a choice. They'll they'll take it down, and then they shut down my account. They're suspended me for indefinite period of time. And what ended up happening, I saw that like in the middle of the night, probably like 1 or 2 in the morning, that had happened. My phone had been blowing up by people trying to contact me. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going back to sleep, because this will work itself out at some point. This is where having a legal background is helpful too, because I knew I'm not making money off it. I make $0 off of my Twitter account. It's not what I try to do. I do it to help people. I don't do it to make personal, to help me. I do perfectly fine in my business, and I don't really need any money from that. So I'm saying it's all fair use, because I'm trying to teach people. I'm not trying to profit off it. And the next day I wake up and I see there's a whole bunch of MLB players that were pissed off that my account got taken down. A whole bunch of people journalists. There were people in front office positions with Major League Baseball teams that were like, "What the heck is going on here?" So I was amazed at the amount of people that actually cared about it. There were a number of articles written. Yahoo Sports, Jeff Passan, the Washington Post wrote something. So it just, at ESPN, Outside the Lines even had something on it. And I was like, really? That many people care about my account? That's amazing. So it ended up very quickly thereafter, within a few days, you got wind that MLB wanted to talk to me. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. They liked what I did. They thought it was good for the sport, and they just wanted to make sure that the stuff that I did was owned by them, which I was totally fine with. And then they ended up making me kind of an independent contractor for them. So I entered into it, not trying to make anything off of it. And then they ended up, it ended up working really well.
So do you think, and obviously I'm sure you're aware of all the game clips, and I'm guilty of myself on Instagram. Guys take a little game clip and they'll kind of, show something, teach something, talk about it, comment on it. Do you see, you with your law background, do you see this being a thing where maybe Major League Baseball licenses people to use their content in that way? Or is it just going to continue to just kind of be like, hey, it's fine on social media to do this or do that, but there's a lot of it on Instagram. There's not as much on Twitter. I think you're kind of a little more unique on Twitter.
Yeah.
What do you see about the use of these clips and stuff and going forward?
I think it's a gray area right now. I think it's a tough thing. They're struggling with it because they make so much money off of their interactive media presence that I think they're at kind of a crossroads, because my point is, what we do is, even sharing clips like that, I think it makes it more interesting and more likely that somebody is going to watch a game than less likely. I mean, they're not going to watch a game through GIFs or through tiny clips.
Yeah.
Especially when we're using it to coach. I mean, we're not posting a link so that people can get around blackout rules or anything like that. We are trying to help grow the game by making people interested in it, by helping players get better, and by sharing, by everybody sitting around watching a game and they see something amazing happen and then we can all talk about it. That's what's really going on, not people stealing content to make it their own and monetize it. Now, if you're trying to pass it off and maybe put ads around or something like that, I can see why they might not be excited about that. But if
Yeah.
you're doing it as a coach or doing it to help the game, it seems like we're all on the same team. I mean, MLB wants to grow the game. We want to grow the game. We want to help people get better. The players want to talk about pitches. I mean, you saw Stroman talking last night during the playoff game. And actually, they shared, TBS shared a quote, a tweet that Stroman sent me during the game on their broadcast. I mean, we all talk about this stuff. It's fun. It makes the game more interesting.
Hmm.
And, I think it's important for them to understand that. But you see how there's a gray line. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really tough to tell what the
Yeah.
right thing to do. And I understand why they're struggling with it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually what I was going to mention earlier was that I just cracked open an article about CC Sabathia yesterday,
Yep.
and there was a tweet from you. There was
Yep.
or a quote from you, not a tweet, but a quote from you. And they said, the
Yeah, I was
popular.
interviewed for that one. Yep.
Yeah, so that's very cool. So how has it evolved? So obviously, you had the hiccup, and you're back. You're back online. I assume Twitter sent some goons to your house. Did you get tased, or how do they take you down? But
Yeah, I definitely got tased. It was a painful experience. I don't
I
ever want
picture
to do that again.
like a White Goodman and his consigliere Michelle sort of coming up to your house. And but so how has it grown over the years? Because obviously it's taken off, and I don't remember where it was when you got temporarily shut down, but it seems like it exploded a lot since then too. Is that right?
It did. Yeah, it did. And I think part of it was my own coming to grips with, I'd always done it kind of, hey, you don't want to go too far because, MLB might get kind of, if you go over the line, I don't blame MLB for getting pissed off. Part of my legal background is
Yeah.
understanding copyright law and all that. And I would never want to infringe on their business and and I understand where that line kind of is. So I was always concerned about that, but then becoming a certified ninja by MLB gave me a lot more room to do what I like to do, which is help grow the game, explain stuff to people as best I can, uh, and just create a fun experience for people. So it grew because I think, a little more confident in putting stuff out there, and part of it was the notoriety around the whole thing. I think because it became a pretty big deal, and some people that I didn't even know followed me cared. Kelvin Herrera was like the first person to tweet out something as a player, going, "No, this can't." And I don't even think I still don't think he officially follows me. But
Just
he
lurking.
put, yeah, and he put out. I mean, he was the first one to put out a tweet, which I was like, wow, that's these guys put their necks on the line a little bit when they do something like that, and I appreciated it. Uh, and then a lot of other people, followed up. So I think all that groundswell maybe made more people aware that this was out there, and I think that's probably one reason why it grew, but also me just feeling more confident putting stuff out there. And MLB actually officially retweeting stuff that I do probably helps.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and so tell me a little bit about your process. So obviously you put out a lot of those things. You put out a lot of content. Are you a couple weeks? Well, I'm sure obviously there's so much, like yesterday you're tweeting games from yesterday or clips from
Yeah.
yesterday's game. But I mean, do you have a process? Or are you like way ahead? Do you have anything like, you get something from August and you'll put it out there in September, or how do you keep the content flowing without making your life crazy?
I make my life crazy for part of it. There are definitely I was in Japan last week, and I was tweeting from Japan, which is why that some of those the drawings started because I was on the plane, and I was like, I can't freaking stream the game, and I want to, and I saw that I think Tuki Toussaint threw a curveball, and everybody's like, can you gift that? I'm like, I'm freaking on a plane and I can't, but I'll draw it. And so I ended up, my crappy drawings. Uh, so I put that out there. But yeah, part of it is making your life crazy. I mean, there's definitely times where, uh, I'm spending way too much time looking at some of the stuff. But usually in the morning, I'll look at games and try to find pitchers that I'm interested in that I think are useful for people to see, or that might have had a really good game, or that have interesting pitches that I think would be useful for unique type of pitches, like Trevor Richards with his changeup. I think is a fun illustration of one way to throw a ridiculously pronated changeup. So I'll look at his games and try to find a close up of a GIF and of a video and slow it down. But there's pitchers I follow. Then there's just looking at individual games. I watch a lot of games. But in the off season, I typically will go through historical games and try to find different angles of things, or pitchers that people might have forgotten about, or pitchers that people are interested in, and just find out what made them tick. The other thing I do is look at mental game stuff, because I think so much of this game is not all of it is a physical thing. Like you can have the same stuff as a pitcher, but not be as good as the pitcher as the pitcher. I mean,
yeah.
And that more than anybody. I mean, it's not all about the physical part of the game. So much of it is mental, and so much of the mental game is unique to that individual. I mean, some people can go by and be really confident and cocky and competitive. You could have a Max Scherzer mentality, or you can have a Corey Kluber mentality. They're both great pitchers, but they're not the same at all in mound demeanor. And Kluber just has to calm himself down and be almost robotic, and Scherzer wants to tear your head off. And different people are different ways. I mean, I might have been my son probably tends more to be a Corey Kluber type, even though at first, as a young kid, I was like, Max Scherzer is a great guy to model yourself after. And it would ramp him up too much that he couldn't control himself. So he had to slow the game down and just be dispassionate about, I'm going to execute this pitch. So there's mental game stuff, there's grip stuff, there's mechanic stuff, there's workout stuff, there's just sequencing, deception. There's so many parts of the game that make up a pitcher that I feel like I want to share, and that maybe somebody just takes one thing from what I put out there and it makes a difference in their career or their son's career, or they can coach better because of it. That's really what drives me to do all this stuff.
Yeah, and that's I think it's very astute, because I went on I'm kind of in a little bubble out here in Central Illinois, and I run my academy with a great business partner, but I'm a very Kluber type kind of guy, at least like outwardly. Like you'd never see much emotion from me at all on the field. And even as a coach, I was a head coach for the first time last year, one of our academy teams. And, for a 14U team, like, I'm not going to yell at our kids. I'm not going to freak out on them after the game. Like, I'm not super up and down because they're 14. Like, I know there's a percentage of pop-ups they're just going to drop. Like, there's a percentage of this that they're just not going to do well. And that doesn't bother me at all. But, with that, like, so I coached with some other coaches on a trip to the Dominican Republic in August, and these two guys are very different than me. They're also just very, well, I shouldn't say also, because I don't know if I'm a great coach. That's not for me to decide, but they were great coaches, but they were also very much more high energy than I was. Mm-hmm. They talked to the kids in a different way. So they had this like different dynamic between the three of us, where I was sort of like the calm, not calm, but just like the stoic, watching, observing, and kind of like the low energy, I don't know, professional kind of demeanor. And not to say they were unprofessional, it's not how I mean it, but they were much more like, get the kids going, very positive, also negative when they needed to be negative, but just like they reached a percentage of the kids. And so of these like 12 or 13, I'd say like 4 or 5 of them like really kind of bonded with me. Like they saw themselves in me a little bit. And then the other third with one of the coaches and the other third with the other. And so just for me looking around, I'm like, I don't think I could reach some of these kids in the same way that he could, just because of our different personalities. Like he's going to gravitate to that guy because he likes the positivity, or he likes, getting pumped up from him or whatever it is. And some other guys who are a little, maybe like Klubots, little mini Klubots, maybe get some of that kind of calming, like whatever energy from me. So I think you're definitely right. There's just a lot of ways to do it. It's almost like trying on different hats and different shoes just to see which one fits because you just
Yep,
don't know.
exactly. And to your point, I think that people can see through if you're faking it too. You've got to be yourself as a coach. So if you're coaching and you're trying to be somebody else, it's just like if someone's a sales guy and they're trying to sell you in a way that's not natural, or if you're trying to be a friend to somebody and you're acting like somebody that you're not. I think it becomes really really obvious, and especially when you're coaching kids. I think the best thing you can be, the number one thing as a coach, is to make people somehow enjoy the game and be themselves, and then they'll practice more. Then you can give them a roadmap to get better. But until they enjoy the game, until they want to invest that, it's useless. You can give them all the greatest information in the world. They ain't going to do anything with it if they don't enjoy it. So understanding how to reach each kid, there are different personalities, there are different things that click with them. So especially having coaches that are different is useful, but also you being able to access different parts of your personality or different commonalities with these with the players they're coaching, I think is really important. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you.
So what you obviously observed tons of pitchers, and obviously as you're creating these gifs, what have you seen change in the last? So number one, how long have you been doing this? Like officially, when was follower number one?
Oh, it's probably like 5 years ago, maybe.
Okay. So what trends have you seen from your vantage point there, in like what pitchers throw, their stuff, like all that? Give me your perspective.
I think they're getting a little bit smarter in understanding why pitches do what they do, and people are focusing more maybe on things like spin axis, stuff like that, sequencing. I think some of the overlay stuff that I'm doing is making people understand. I just had a pretty well-known professional pitcher, a major league pitcher, reach out to me going, dude, I learned so much in the last year about sequencing. Can you do this for one of my pitches just between you and me about this at bat that I think I did really well in? And I did it for him. And it was just neat to see that, and this happens decently regularly, that either MLB guys are trying to learn new pitches or see what pitches work well with each other. And then they'll reach out to me, which is weird because I would have thought they'd be able to do it in their own clubhouses, or that the coaches would do it for them. But I think what happens is they don't want to ask, and coaches are so busy doing other things that even the video guys are doing other things. So they reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help any. That's one of the reasons why I do all this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's cool to see. So I think specific pitchers are trying to learn. I think pitchers that are not major league pitchers are trying to learn that type of stuff from MLB guys, really being a little more sophisticated in what they're trying to pick up from it. But I think MLB guys are now trying to really figure out hey, why is Max Scherzer able to do this stuff and I'm not? What is he doing mixing up pitches? How's he getting people out that I'm not doing?
Yeah, and I thought Kyle Freeland he was great, obviously, for the Rockies the other day, and there was a quick stat cast. I don't know if it was stat cast, but a quick stat they flashed up on the screen, which said that he was on the corners of the plate 30% of the time, I think,
Yep.
one corner or the other. And then as you start to watch, you're like, oh yeah, like he really is just like crushing the outer third, inner third. And
Yep.
a guy like Dallas Keuchel, same way.
Yep.
And it is tough sometimes to like backwards manufacture like what you do well and what you don't. And from a pitcher's perspective, I know that on the rare, because I was a plebeian, the rare times I'd be on TV, playing in Sugarland or somewhere like that where they had like a broadcast, I would just completely misremember pitches where I'd be like, oh man, how do you hit that so well? Like that was on the outer corner. It's like, nah, you go to the tape.
Right.
It was like outer half at best. And you're like, oh, that makes sense. And, I
Yep.
put something on my Instagram the other day of a fastball cutter sequence that I threw. And I put that up and there was a little blurb about it, but it was distinct for me because I knew the reporter, Mike Ashmore, he's a great guy. He took that video and he sent it to me after that game. And I was just learning that pitch, the cutter, which to me is the hardest pitch ever. It's so hard to learn because you can't usually see it move.
Right.
And I remember that at bat because I threw fastball to get ahead, and then I threw the guy a cutter, and I couldn't see either of them move. They both looked dead straight to me, but when I went to the tape, I could see the cutter cut. Like, it's very different on tape. It's like,
Yep.
oh, it is doing its thing. So I think there's definitely something to be said where, like especially guys like Scherzer, like it looks like his head just comes way off the ball as
I
he's
think it does.
throwing. A
Yeah.
lot of guys, their eyes do, yeah.
Yep.
So you wonder how much they pick up in that last 30% of its flight or 25% of its flight, and if they really, can, if their memory matches what actually the video caught.
Totally right. And I think some of the other stuff is you don't know how much of that head movement or whatever adds to deception too. When you have a Dylan
Yeah.
Betances who really falls off, or Chris Stavinsky who falls off, some coaches will fix that and say, I'm going to fix this guy. I'm going to fix this flaw I see. Number one, you don't know if that's actually going to, if it'll affect his velocity. If he does, if strides straighter to plate, how's that going to affect everything else in a butterfly effect type thing? But also, how is the falling off affecting his deception on his change, on Davinsky's changeup? The fact he falls off, is that messing with pitchers? Kyle Freeland with his leg hang, is that affecting batters being able to time him even more so than being able to hit corners? If I hit corners versus him hitting corners, am I going to get the same results because he goes about it different ways? And I don't think we measure deception very well. So we can go out and look at StatCast stuff, which is awesome, but does that tell the absolute full picture? And I don't think it does. I mean, I think Betances, number one, being 6'8", and two, having a really unique way of falling off and head movement, or Scherzer having a lot of head movement. Does that mess with a batter's perception and Scherzer's arm slot? And just the intimidation factor of knowing this guy wants to tear my freaking head off and he's going to shove it down my throat. Does that affect some batters? Do they start thinking now their approach of, what is he trying to do to me? And you become defensive. I know Pedro talks about that all the time, where he knows when he's in a batter's head, and he's like, I got him. If they look at all defensive on on this pitch, you can pick it up. So you were talking about earlier, just being able to, what makes you a good pitcher, but part of it is reading the batter. And some of these guys do it better, and that's not something you can measure necessarily in StatCast. You can't measure that in spin rate stuff. It's the sophistication and learning stuff throughout years of pitching. What the batter's plan and what he's trying to do. He looked bad on this pitch. Maybe I'm going to go back to that later in the game, but I'm not going to follow it up with another pitch. With this, I'm not going to follow 1-2 the same pitch that he looked bad on, because I need to get deeper in the count. You just don't. There's so much of a game aspect of it that we love to boil it down into stats. I think some of the story is outside of the statistics you can look at too, the measurables.
Yeah, and I think the big leagues is it's a tough environment to teach younger level players, because, for example, like you could say, all right, well, why would you throw 3 straight fastballs on the outer corner? Or, why wouldn't you tunnel? Why wouldn't you go in and out, or hard than soft, or whatever? But sometimes, especially, and this is less prevalent at the big leagues because guys are so good, but I know I'd faced hitters in my minor league career where I would just throw him the same pitch 5 times in a row. Like
Right.
Sometimes it was an inside fastball, because like I can just tell his approach is kind of like opposite field, like see the ball deep. He doesn't have a lot of pop. He's kind of maybe a little bit slow to the ball. He's got a little bit of a long swing, and his bat path is, whatever. And I just feel like I can throw inside fastballs until he's out,
Yep.
and that sometimes that's okay. But obviously that is tougher the higher level you go. And just like all that mixing pitches and stuff, like sometimes it's knowing like I don't need to mix at all. I just need to do this over and over and over, and I'll get this guy.
Right. And some of it is, so you have someone like Chris Sale, who probably isn't the way I would, like personally would approach a game, but he's pretty darn good. And he doesn't think about it at all. He thinks about, he lets the catcher call the game, and he just says, you know what, if I think about shaking a catcher off, that means I don't have faith in that pitch. And that means I think my fastball can't get by this guy if the catcher calls a fastball. And I don't want to think like that. I'm going to throw the best fastball I can at that moment. in the spot that it's supposed to be. And, I'm going to just beat him with the pitch the catcher called. Burley was like that too. So you can be successful with a lot of approaches. I think you can be a thinking man's pitcher. You can be a total robot. You can be it just really, it's going to depend on how you approach the game and the level that you're at. You're right. I mean, am I going to tell an 8-year-old to tunnel pitches? Heck no.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
useless.
funny that because you're absolutely right. As soon as you were saying Sale, like I remember Burley because he's one of the guys. His big thing was going so fast between pitches. Like he wanted to get the ball and throw it, and he didn't. He didn't call his own pitches. He just throw whatever they put down. And you're like, when you talk about Chris Sale doing it that way, you go, oh well, that's because he throws 97 with a weird
Right.
arm slot, with deception, with the world's best slider. But then Mark Burley was doing that throwing 85, so that like throws that theory out the window.
Right.
And then you're like, well, how does that work? How do I reconcile that? Of
Yeah.
course,
And
yeah,
I think that it's important to understand, and this is one reason why. I mean, actually, one of the main reasons why I do what I do, which is I try to get different views. I'm not trying to sell anybody on any one view of the game. I don't think there is one way of doing it. I think there's multiple ways of doing it. I think you can be a command pitcher and be successful. I think you can be a velocity pitcher and be successful. I think you need to have. I mean, ideally, you have both, and there's no reason why you shouldn't. Which comes first? Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to depend on the pitcher, but I think generally you want to have the intent before you develop command, but not necessarily for everybody.
yeah,
I think there's so many different ways of going about it. Different grips that work for different people because it depends on your arm shot slot, your hand size, your the way you're releasing it, your overall mechanics, what other pitches you have. Just relying on, hey, that pitch moved a lot isn't necessarily the best thing to do either, because you don't know how it fits within your portfolio of pitches, and how you're really going to attack hitters. There's so much more to the game than I think most folks get into, which is why you have to know it. Why I think it's important to share as much as you can about different approaches and let people figure some of this stuff out for themselves, what works well for them, and give them some direction. I mean, I think as a coach, then you have to have that toolbox where you then say, oh, well, this pitcher, he does this stuff well, and I'm going to try to shape him more in this way, or I'm going to challenge him more in this way. Uh, I think being a student of the game helps a lot in that aspect, and it's fun.
yeah, for sure. So talk a little bit about how you. I mean, the internet is changing, right? It's changing everything. And my most recent podcast, I just kind of talked about some of the stuff I'm doing personally and why. And like you see, like obviously you have a big following, and you're a respected internet pitching mind. And with coaches out there trying to move up the ladder in maybe college baseball, because obviously it's tough to get a D1 head coaching job, right? You got to pay your dues, you got to
Yep.
start somewhere at the bottom and work your way up, and it's you're scrapping. And I know recently, and I mentioned this before as well, that Matt Lyle, who has another massive internet following,
Yep.
great hitting mind, seems like a great guy. I don't know him, but I know he just took the job as Mizzou's hitting coach. And so you wonder, as coaches are sitting in their office every year doing the shuffle, like, all right, hey, here we got a whole new staff here at Baseball University. What can we do to make our program better? Who's the best guy we can get? And you look at someone, okay, well, I read Matt Lyle's tweets and I watch his videos every day. I watch Rod Friedman's pitching stuff every day. Can we get him? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So how much do you feel like the internet is changing the coaching world? And is it imperative that other people start doing maybe something like you're doing?
I think I've seen people be successful doing that. I don't think it's a necessity that you do it. Some of it's, you can do it the old-fashioned way, which is just be a good coach in the real world, which I think is important. I think you can do it a variety of different ways. I think it's important to reach out to younger players by having a social media presence, and making the game entertaining and having them feel free to ask you questions and stuff like that. Whether it's going to help you move up the ladder, I think it helps a little bit, having that, because more people can see you. I mean, on social media, when you're having a big following, you're having coaches and other folks that see the way you think. You're being transparent with it. They can say, hey, I like the way this guy thinks, I want to hire him. So sure, I mean, I think it's important to do that, but I think it's important for all of us just as stewards of the game to share uh, whatever we can on social media to help the next generation of players in general. I get asked questions every day by players. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And it's all because of social media. And I love doing it. I don't care if it's my kid or someone else's kid. I want everybody to, if you want to put in time to get better at the game, I'm going to help you get better at the game. And I think most of us are like that. I think most coaches want to help. And I think the best way you can help people, the way you can reach the most folks, is probably social media right now. I mean, you can help a lot of people with it amplifies your voice basically. So it helps you
Hmm.
network, but it also helps you help the most people. So it's kind of a double win type thing.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so let's talk about your son a little bit, his journey, because I've heard he's an exceptional ball player. Obviously, he plays Georgia Tech. So tell me a little bit about his path and his development.
Sure. So we started. I mean, he started as a well at two started playing baseball. So from a young age, and also played other sports. I mean, he played basketball growing up, uh, which I think is important just from an athletic standpoint. Just being able to be a well-rounded athlete, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean,
Hmm.
first be a good student and be a good person. But if athletics are interesting to you, you might as well. You can a lot of that stuff transfers just being an overall athlete and not pigeonholing yourself at a young age. So that was one of my overall philosophies. But he grew up, I mean, a shortstop pitcher type for most of his youth, and I got drug into to coaching coaching at a very young age with him. So I was coaching teams from like 6 years old, 5 years old, and up, because I just like kids. I mean, I want to feel like it's one way that I can give back to the community is helping kids and being there for them, everybody, not just my own kid. And then as he got older and older, you know, he still can hit. He just doesn't like it as much. Uh, and in his mind, yeah, he like one of his best things last year was he had a monster walk off home run, bat flipped it, ran around I tweeted it out. And so that was like a highlight of his year last year. But he's, in the end, I think he's more of a pitching. He'd rather be dictating the pace than being reacting to the pace of a game. So I think that's why pitching appeals to him. He he's hit 95 in off the mound. But his big thing is he spins the ball really well. So he's got a wicked changeup and a wicked curveball, and those are two things that he kind of lives on in addition to velocity. So all of that stuff. But his journey has helped me get better as far as a Twitter presence and as a coach, because you want to help your kid out and you keep learning and learning, different ways of doing it. And as I do, I don't just keep it for myself or keep it to him, because I think it's kind of selfish. I share it with all my other players that I coach, as well as people on Twitter. So having a player go through it, number one, it shows you that you can do. I think either you did it yourself or you helped coach a player that through the development process. I think it adds some credence that you kind of know what you're doing, but it also helps you have a real live test tube type thing where you can test out your theories on things. And we did things that didn't work. You mentioned Ben Brewster, but I know he did it as a player, did a lot of things, a lot of different paths. I ran into him years ago on message boards, and his journey was a lot like mine as a coach. Basically, you run down a bunch of paths, you take different things from it, and you keep learning. I think all of us have done. I think you've done it as well. It's not having a one way of doing it mentality. It's trying to learn a bunch of different ways and making mistakes and not being afraid to make mistakes, and having a kid go through it, taking those little bits and pieces, and then sharing it with other folks. I think is important. Mental game stuff. I mean, he's gone on and off about, confidence, like every other pitcher. Working with Alan Jaeger one-on-one was awesome, as I know you've done as well. But he just another great resource. I think part of the great thing about being where I am on Twitter is having access to fantastic other coaching minds, and I'm very open-minded because I don't think there's any one answer. I love to hear different views, and everybody's willing to share. So I think networking, asking questions, and having a great community of coaches to take from, who are willing to help is just fantastic. That's a great thing about social media. Great thing about having a kid in the game, and I think it's been a great journey, and it still keeps going.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. It's a heck of a school he's playing for, and it's interesting growing up in this economy, or not economy, but this time of this portion of history, I guess. Because for me as a player, and I've been on the web since 2008 when I started my website and started just blogging and just putting out stuff that I thought I knew about baseball and strength training and whatever, and it's just changed so much in those 10 years. And I remember people, there's always the trolls and the negative people and the haters on the web, but people picked at me writing about pitching mechanics because I'd had Tommy John. And then when I had it a second time, and, like back in the day, they're like, well, why didn't you just fix your mechanics the first time? And I'm like, I don't know if you know what, like, part of history I grew up in. Like, I didn't know anything about pitching mechanics.
Right.
I had like 4 pitching lessons in my whole life. Went to college. We didn't have a pitching coach, and we had great coaches that cared about us, but I didn't have a whole lot of guidance in college, and I kind of pieced it together myself on the web, but there was very little on the web even then, and you had to read like a book, like a Dow Mouse book, and how much can you figure out from a still photo of a pitcher? You know what I mean? Like, there just wasn't that stuff out there, and it's too simplistic anyway to say, oh, I just fix my mechanics and then I'll never get hurt. That's just not how pitching works.
It's not how it works. That's right.
It doesn't. And but nowadays there's so much stuff. It's just so much where it can probably be overwhelming at times, I'd imagine too.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of, again, why I do what I do, which is I have the time and effort and energy and history like you did. I mean, I've been on various baseball communities probably since 2006, maybe, sharing ideas, but also listening. And I've dealt with trolls. I've challenged people as not a troll, but I'll ask questions because that's the legal background again is I'm not going to just believe it because you said it. I'm going to go research it and double check it. And yeah, I think most people that are selling stuff online, actually, they're either doing it because it helped them personally, what they're trying to teach. I don't think people are generally in it to rip people off. I think they're doing it for good reasons because they've seen success for it and they honestly believe that what they're doing helps, but it may not help another person who has different problems. So your job is, there's so much information out there to sort through and figure out what your issue is specifically, and try to fix it. But the other thing is navigating the whole troll thing is, I mean, I think right now I'm kind of risen above it. And if somebody trolls me, I just out them and, say, hey, there's this guy being a jerk. What do you think? And I actually had someone delete their account because I did that, which I was really impressed with.
I think I saw one of those recently, actually, on yours. And was it someone like picking on like a young boy or girl, like who had pretty good throwing mechanics?
It was picking on that girl that has great throwing mechanics. Yeah. And I tweeted that out. I was like, dude, I'll give you $100 if you throw better than she does. And he ended up deleting his account. I was like, that's perfect because those are the guys that don't deserve to be online anyway. There's no reason for that. We should all be a community where we help people. I'm okay with being challenged, but I'm not okay with people being a jerk, especially to a 9-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had one recently. I posted a video of one of our kids who he had a growth plate injury, and he's come back, and just in coming back, he's completely healthy. He's been healthy for this whole 2018 year, but his velocity just like hasn't come back. And sometimes that can be really enigmatic and tough to figure out. Like you feel like you're throwing the same way, but you're not, especially when you just get like spit out right into high school baseball or summer baseball where you're just going to go pitch with what you've got right now. Like you can't really like take time to fix it at the moment.
Right.
And it can just be a really draining, like mentally frustrating, and just like make you feel very desolate and like what do I do? How do I fix this? Like I'm not myself. I mean, that's how a lot of guys' careers end. Like there's so many guys that you don't hear about who got Tommy John or got labrum surgery. They go back to the minor leagues. They're 4 miles per hour slower. They can't get guys out the same way, and they can't figure out why they're 4 miles per hour slower. You know,
Right.
their careers just quietly end. So I post this thing on Instagram, and it was more just like about the journey and how it can be frustrating, but that he and myself and this kid were starting to kind of like figure it out. Like he'd made some progress recently. We were excited about it. And I get a comment, and the guy's like, well, I jump into mechanics and I look at this and I look at that and I look at this. There's just a lot more to it. Just saying. And I'm like, you know, you could have phrased that differently. Like, I don't know. Did you have to like say that you're a better coach than me right now? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like,
I think people just do feel like that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't say to your face that way, but they would say it online, anonymity. And my thing is, I think nobody learns from the whole being a jerk and saying my way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. You learn from actually taking a step back and being people. I mean, just treat people like people and just ask questions, because you're not dumb. You have reasons for doing what you're going to do, and saying, hey, maybe did you think about this, or why are you doing it this way? And maybe you're 100% right, and I can learn from you. But when you put up a wall where you're being a jackass, you're not really listening. And I think we can all get better from listening more, and you know, and talking at people less, talking with people a little bit more.
yeah, absolutely. And we had a back and forth on Instagram the other day about cutters. And I at least appreciate like the two guys who had a different view than myself about cutters. Like we didn't come to an agreement, but each of our comments were, I disagree, and here's why. And that's completely fine. Like we don't have to, just because I put some out there, you don't have to agree with it. But when you say you disagree, completely, totally fine, right? We didn't insult each other. We didn't start throwing punches, and like, that's okay. It's just an interesting world I think that's probably why a lot of people struggle to put themselves out there on the web, because it like can be something you definitely ruminate. I'm sure you've kind of had these days where you're like, everyone's picking on me. Like I'm just trying to be helpful. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I think back in the day, probably I think when I was kind of relatively early on, it's mostly the whole the pain guy debates back in the day, where you have a guy who just won't listen to another. He has his mind made up one way of doing things, and you can point out a million different things, and it just was. And then I was like, you know what, I'm not engaging in this anymore. It's not going anywhere. And when you
Yeah.
debate like that, eventually people can't tell if you're the asshole or if the other guy's the asshole, if you hang around assholes. So it's you might as well just move beyond it, and and it's not my personality anyway. I challenge people to find out what they really believe and to learn. I don't challenge them to belittle them. But when someone already has their mind totally made up and they're never going to listen to you, then just move on. And life's too short to keep going at it. And and who's to say? I, I don't think he's right about stuff, but I mean, I'm pretty sure he's not. But he's got his view, and I'm not. He can live his life the way he wants to with coaching whatever he's going to do.
Yep. Fair enough. So as we wrap up, so I want to be sensitive of your time. I need to know, do you have a thesaurus by you all day? I mean, filthy, disgusting. Give me your favorite adjectives for some of these pitches that Blake Treenan and some of these guys are throwing.
Inhumane, I kind of liked. I think I used discombobulated for Dylan Botanis' pitch against Mookie Betts, and then Betts ended up going yard the next at bat, which
He's kind of good.
Yeah, I like Mookie Betts. I'm never gonna. I mean, he's generally not rooting for hitters, but it's hard to root against that guy. Yeah, I just a lot of it is making it up as you go along. Obviously, I can't have a different adjective for every pitch, but some of it is I look at something and I'm like, most of it's making things up on the spot, and I don't have an agenda a lot of times. If I see something and describe it a certain way, it's probably because it hit me that way at that point in time. So, some of the things, that I see are just amazing. I mean, that's the thing I think most people are taking from it is it's freaking hard as hell to be a hitter in the major leagues. And if that's the only thing you get out of what I do, then that's great. Then I don't have to listen to people when I go to a baseball game go, why did he swing at that? I'm like, because the pitch was perfectly tunneled with another pitch and he couldn't freaking pick it up. Or the pitch is ridiculously nasty and nobody's going to be able to hit it. But I get tired of that. Why did he swing at that and just throw strikes are two of the things that
Yeah.
just drive me crazy. Like you step in the box or step on the bump and you try to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's even more obvious just because guys have so much more movement now than it seems like they did even just a couple years ago. So much more, especially like the arm side movement that you see from the sinker guys and the changeups.
Yep.
Because the changeup's very much evolving. But I remember I went to an open major league tryout back in God, just right after I graduated from college, like 2009 or something. And you see 300 guys there, and some were in their softball uniforms. And you don't think they're just there just to like let's just go have a day at the park. Like you imagine there's like some part of their brain that thinks they could actually like earn a contract with a major league team. And then I wonder, I'm like, do these people watch TV and they see, name a pitcher throws a curveball right down the middle of the plate and the guy swings and misses or takes it. And he's like, he should have destroyed that. I would have destroyed that.
Right.
Because he hits 350 for his local beer league. And you just wonder if people really have any legitimate perspective on how sharp like a big league breaking ball is, because they're like terrifying. I mean, they look nothing like that loopy thing you see on TV. They're crazy.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I don't think. I mean, I think a lot of people don't. I think sometimes. I mean, some things are better right now. Not only are pitchers, they're obviously throwing harder. They get better movement. People understand how to coach that stuff now, as opposed to just trial and error. A lot of it is you can figure it out. But also camera angles are better, I think, too. So you're able to see really what's going on, as opposed to back in the day where you had off-center camera angles and crappy lens and not HD, where you couldn't really tell what Nolan Ryan's pitches look like or Tom Seaver's pitches look like back in the day, or Steve Carlton. You just knew that they were getting results. But now I think you can see a lot more of, and especially in certain stadiums, how the ball's really moving. And then you have whole StatCast stuff, knowing how many inches pitches moved and their spin rates and stuff. It's and how and it was a rare game back in the day where you'd have even a radar gun. So you didn't know how hard these guys were throwing, and now you do. So I think it's a little more daunting when you see some of these guys, like how amazing what they do is, and I think it actually helps the game because part of it. I think baseball, when everybody thought anybody can do it, maybe it's more boring when you see things that are amazing. That you're watching a pitcher do something that is ridiculous or bad, or Aaron Judge hit a ball, 470 feet. You're like, wow, I'd pay money to go see that, or I want to watch this because I might see something I've never seen before. And I think that stuff helps the game. And I just wish fans would, and coaches and dads. It's mostly, dads in the stands yelling at their kids. Why did you swing at that? Why did you throw strikes? Type stuff.
Yeah.
Just want to wring somebody's neck.
Well, I feel like you could be an influencer. You could. It's funny how slang changes. Like, there's guys throwing fuzz. He's throwing fuel. He's throwing Parmesan pellets. Like, you can be the guy. You can make the new terms. You can pave the new way for all these. Just the way baseball lingo gets passed on. You could have the Rob Friedman book of baseball lingo.
Yeah, they're just funny because there are a couple of things that have actually that people will pick up on. They take on a life of their own. One of them, unfortunately, was my nickname for Blake Trinan, which he hates, the Witch, which I think is a great nickname. I mean, I think
he is a witch.
Yeah,
you just own up to it. Look, dude. That's not normal. Anything you do, it's not normal.
Yeah, but I had people around him reach out to me going, he hates this because of religious stuff, and he wants to give credit to God about what he did. I'm like, I ain't arguing with you, man. I'm not going to offend you. I just think what you're doing is amazing, and that's obviously all the term meant. But there was an MLB.com article on it, why I called him the Witch, and not interviewing me, but interviewing him about it. And later on, I think Cressy asked him about it. He's like, yeah, I hate that nickname. I don't know why anybody's writing articles on that stuff. Like, yeah, dude, I don't know, man.
Don't throw 98-mile-per-hour sinkers, and then you won't.
Oh yeah, I mean,
if you don't like it, play less good.
Right, exactly. If you don't like it, then just don't be that good. Totally.
Yeah, I watched Zach Britton pitch at Fenway and I was like way out in center field, and he and Trinan are kind of in a special category of people, along with like Rivera and Kenley Jansen, where like their ball just doesn't make sense. Like they just throw a 96-mile-per-hour cutter or sinker, and just from that vantage point in dead center, just as soon as the ball left Britton's hand, it was like almost like it was a tennis forehand. Like as soon as it left his hand, it's just zooming right back down on the ground.
Right.
And there's just like, it doesn't make sense. And it really, like, he needs to just own up to being a witch. Like, I'm sorry, because it's not normal. And it's amazing, but it's not normal.
Yeah, there was a point where I think I saw one of his sliders that did the same thing, and I was like, I can throw a ball standing up. I think I said that in a tweet. I can literally have a baseball in my hand and throw it to the ground, and his ball would hit the ground before mine. And he was throwing it 60 feet 6 inches, and I'm throwing it 5'10".
It's crazy. This world is baseball world's changing. Well, Rob, hey, thanks for being on the show. This was a really fun conversation, and keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I think everyone's just like captively watching. You're like your own little highlight reel. I think people wake up and check out what you got going on. So it's very cool, and I appreciate what you're doing for the game.
It's great to hear, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that wraps it up for this week. What a great episode. What a great talk. Rob's a terrific guy, and what he's doing has really, I think, spotlighted a lot of the changes in baseball and the way pitchers are evolving and the way stuff and the standard is evolving in pro baseball. So be sure to check out, if this is your first time listening to the show, check out the archives. We've got other great interviews with former players, some of my own stories, and just lots of different monologues, topics, talks about pitching, baseball, and everything in between.